pun not intended, and have even seen patients as a therapist, therapy intern in training. I'm not currently a licensed professional. The advice given on this channel does not represent official therapeutic advice, but I am a relationship coach, and so I take it very seriously. For those of you who are interested, if you feel like you might be stuck in a toxic, dysfunctional, and or abusive relationship, you can feel free to reach out to me for help if you'd like to work your way through it. You can contact me on my Instagram. I'll go ahead and link my socials here in the chat. And also, on a very serious note, if any of these topics resonate with you tonight, I want to take a special moment. There is help available. If you're working through your stuff, then I am a great resource to reach out to. However, if you are in immediate, imminent danger and need help, I want to, first off, before we even get out the gate, encourage you to reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline. For people who are in imminent danger in a relationship that they're in. No one should have to live in fear in a relationship, whether it's romantic or otherwise. So I want to take a second to say that. So with introductions out of the way, that is the topic for tonight. Like I said, it's a bit of a sensitive topic, so I will endeavor to treat it with the utmost care. Let's go ahead and preview the topic for the night, and then we'll dive in. So, abuse.
Are you able to kind of go
Oh, sorry about that.
over and detail the different types of abuse, just like you did, but kind of like maybe like provide an example of, because maybe someone's out there like, oh, I'm not sure what it is, but it's like, oh wait, I am experiencing that.
So I think that would fall like under like, you know, psychological.
So yeah, what can be like a psychological? And don't worry if you need a minute to break. We'll just tell the editor, yo, cut it.
So it could be like gaslighting, right? So you're playing with a person's mind, you're toying with their mind, you're making them start doubting and questioning themselves. So now they're not even trusting their own instincts.
Yeah.
So you're in there. So it's like you're in their head then. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Emotional abuse is like, oh, you're worthless, you're not enough, no one else is gonna love you, you're lucky that I'm with you.
Yeah, you're not gonna find anybody better than me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Physical abuse.
Yeah,
Of course.
obviously, yeah.
Sexual abuse. So like once like let's say you guys just had an argument, you like with your partner, you guys just fought, and the person is like, okay, well, like now trying to like have sex, and then like the
Are you able to kind of go over and detail?
So a little bit of a preview of tonight's talk. I neglected to mention this. Giant trigger warning on everything that we're going to talk about tonight. This is a sensitive topic. For those of you who are new to the stream, I do talk about individual mental health topics. I also talk about relationship-related mental health topics as well as dating. And this is probably one of the more sensitive topics that I've talked about to date. So if this is a sensitive topic for you, totally understandable. For those of you who unfortunately recognize this in some of your past relationships, or God forbid, maybe in this situation in a current relationship, I want to give you guys the education and tools that you need in order to recognize the signs and symptoms of abuse and know what to do if you happen to be stuck in a situation like this. So before we get started, let's go ahead and talk about the types of abuse, and we've got a video that we'll watch to talk about each of these more in depth. Let's see. And there's a whole bunch of topics that we can talk about here. But most notably, let's see, I don't like that one very well. So types of abuse, you've got emotional, physical, which is probably what most people think of in terms of types of abuse. We've also got sexual abuse. Financial abuse is when people attempt to hold and financial abuse, which is when people try to hold financial power of us, right? Those are historically thought of as the four types of abuse: physical, sexual, financial, and emotional, otherwise sometimes known as verbal abuse. Sometimes it's called psychological, sometimes it's called emotional or verbal. They kind of go back and forth. So those are historically the four types. There are some additional types that have been proposed throughout the years, like cultural, technological, that sort of thing. But historically, those four are the most commonly thought of. And so, in terms of abuse statistics here, let's see. So it's estimated that over 12 million men and women fall prey to intimate partner violence. Content warning on some of these things here. This is in terms of physical violence in particular, though. So, of course, the statistics are going to be higher for other when we include other types of abuse as well. So, yes, this is unfortunately a thing that happens. There are different types of abusive relationships and toxic relationships, so we'll spend a little bit of time talking about it. One thing that I want to delineate is we have the 4 different types of abuse. And then in addition to that, we can have a single perpetrator abuse relationships where there's, and this gets into a controversial topic. We'll talk more about it as the night goes on, where there's one person who's thought of as the perpetrator. So for example, with physical abuse, that's pretty cut and dry, right? It's one person's the perpetrator. There are also relationships where there are multiple perpetrators, aka situations of mutual abuse. The topic of mutual abuse is a little bit controversial, which is why I bring it up. We'll talk more about mutual abuse as the night goes on. One thing that I really strive as a person in the mental health field and as a mental health advocate, I want to empower people and educate them on mental health topics and things like abuse, but I also want to empower people to take accountability in their lives and make positive changes. I think often in this field, there's a lot of victim mentality that goes on. And the purpose of me talking about this tonight is not to make people feel as though they're a victim, although certainly people in these situations can be victimized. But it's to encourage people to take accountability for their side of the street in relationships. If you're the victim of a single perpetrator abusive relationships, I highly urge you to get help. Work through things if you feel like that's what you want to do, or in the relationship and seek help if not. If you're someone in a mutual abusive relationship, which means you're also committing acts of abuse, I urge you to take accountability for that and take accountability for your part, because that's all you can do ultimately, and seek to change yourself. And if you're interested in saving that relationship, maybe and cleaning up your side of the street, you'll encourage your partner to do so too. However, if you change and your partner doesn't, then you'll have to decide whether you want to remain in that relationship. So that is my PSA, my soapbox here. Let's dive into the 6 different types of abuse. We talked about 4. This video mentions an additional 2. The first 4 that I mentioned were historically thought of as the main 4. However, lately there have been recognized some others as well.
Hi, welcome back
Oh, sorry. Gotta adjust all my audio here. Sorry for the rip, y'all.
to Undefined Therapy. And as you can see by the title, we're going to be talking about abuse. It's such a common conception that physical abuse is abuse. Like, no one really argues about that. But there are 5 other types of abuse that a lot of people don't know about, and I want to bring awareness to that. And that's what I'm going to do in this video. So if you want to know the 6 types of abuse, then keep on watching. As I just shared, abuse is something that's happening to children, teenagers, adults, the elderly, and a lot of people don't know some of these types of abuse. And so it's in my...
And I think right out of the gate, this is a great point that she makes, is that abuse, historically, especially when we think of domestic violence, we think of what's called intimate partner violence, which is violence between 2 people that are in a relationship or a spouse. Doesn't necessarily have to be the case. Abuse can be between a parent and a child, obviously. Can be even between siblings, can be between family members, or can obviously be between people in a romantic relationship. So I love that she points that out. I want to make sure that we make that clear from the beginning.
office that I'm walking through people's life story and I'm like, wow, that's abuse. And a lot of them don't make that connection. I don't come outright and say that, but as you're helping to guide them, giving them the opportunity to really talk about in depth what actually went on with them, I just find that so many people don't know about these types. So let's jump on into them. So I want to start off by giving the definition of abuse. You can read along with me on the screen right now. A pattern of behavior used by one person to gain and maintain power and control over another. So keywords are power and control. So someone is trying to...
And again, the only caveat that I would mention here is this is in the case of single perpetrator abuse, right? That's kind of the classical definition that we have, where there's one person. And I almost don't even like this definition because it's very like black and white, as if there's like one good person in a relationship and one bad person in a relationship, which my goal as a mental health advocate and a relationship coach is to help people understand that quite often there's not one person that is perfect in any relationship and one person that's not perfect. And I mean, whether we're talking about romantic relationship or any other friendship, whatever, we're all people, we're all flawed. So, but yes, in the classical definition, there's one perpetrator, there's one victim, and it's clear cut. And then we'll also talk about mutual abuse later on tonight. So, but typically this comes from a, attempt by people to gain power and control, which I think sounds really nefarious sometimes. But, as human beings, we all have this desire for control, right? And so what becomes abusive is when our need for control over our world starts to impede on other people's needs and boundaries, right?
Use one of these 6 types of abuse to assert power and control over you. All the information that I'm getting, I will leave down in the description box below, as well as hotlines and any other resources that I can find for someone out there who's watching this video, for them to know that they are not alone and that help is available. As I just shared, I'm making this video because people often just assume that physical is the only abuse, and I want so many more people to get the help that they needed. So let's jump right into these 6 types of abuse. We're going to start off with number 1. This is what people commonly think of when they hear the word abuse, and that's physical abuse. This is someone using hitting, punching, kicking, slapping as a means to assert control over somebody. Invading their personal space physically is also a form of abuse. It's all a means to assert dominance and control over that other person.
And that's usually pretty straightforward, right? Some of these other ones that we'll get into, especially like the verbal and emotional abuse, it can be kind of tricky to understand. Like, hey, is what's going on right now abusive, or is this okay? Sometimes the lines can get hazy. Why most people probably connect abuse with physical abuse in particular is because it is so cut and dry, right? Did you physically harm another person against their will, right? Then that's abuse. Right?
2 is sexual. The article talked about that this could
This
go
one's
into
also pretty
physical, because when we're thinking of sex, it's a physical act, but it deserves its own category just because of so many implications with sex. Sex can be rape, which is a form of abuse, but also criticizing someone about sex, making them feel bad about themselves so that you can control them. For instance, you're nothing if you can't have sex, you're no good at it, that's all you're worth, can really bring somebody down and allow the other person to assert dominance and control over their life. A fact is that until 1993, marital sex was actually illegal. So a lot of people don't know is that sex, even within a relationship, can still be rape. It can still be something that you still can say no to and use as an abuse.
Content warning, by the way.
Number 3 is verbal/emotional abuse. Now, this one I was really happy that they highlighted it, because when we often think of abuse, we definitely think of physical. And if you were raped, most likely you knew that you were raped. That's something that you can identify. But mental and emotional, it's really hard for friends, family members, people that you know to pinpoint. The article actually used that someone described her husband's words, or her ex-husband's words, as a weapon, that it was cutting away at them very slowly each and every day. And that's what...
What's up, Alpha Gamer? How's it going, man? That's your problem, huh? Well, I mean, we can all continue to grow and work through our stuff. So if that's a problem that you feel like you struggle with, then hey, you're in the right place, my friend. I've done things in past relationships that I'm not proud of, and I've grown through a lot of it. So you're in good company, man. Yeah, so I think the verbal is what I was kind of talking about, where sometimes it can be difficult, right? So obviously certain language, like dropping F-bombs at your partner and like, you, blah, 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 you know, that's pretty straightforward sometimes, but sometimes it can be hard of like, hey, is this person being critical of me? And sometimes we're just being critical of someone we're in a relationship, again, romantic, family, whatever. Or sometimes it can cross that line, right, into abuse. So it can be a little bit tricky to navigate sometimes. So I like that she brings someone up.
Words can do. That childhood song, Sticks and Stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Words can hurt. Words can do a lot of damage. Actually, emotional wounds take a lot longer to heal than physical wounds.
Yeah.
So it's really important that if you feel like someone is degrading you, if you feel as though there are so many highs and lows, that there's love and so much hate and just bringing you down, where you are feeling as though you're nothing without that person because that's the words that they're telling you, then that can definitely be a sign of verbal and emotional abuse.
Well, and I think the cycle that she talked about, we'll talk a little bit about we'll talk a little bit about trauma bonds and what's called the cycle of violence. It's more commonly thought of as occurring in domestic violence situations, but it's also pretty much a part of any type of abuse. It doesn't necessarily have to be like physical abuse, and it's a characteristic of what are called trauma bonds. So we'll get into that later tonight as well. Again, lots of heavy topics tonight, but I think it's important information to talk about. So I'm doing my best to do it justice.
Number 4 is mental or psychological abuse. Now, if you watch the Lifetime movie, then you know that this is something that they play out very often in those movies. And that's where the person, the partner, is using mental tricks or psychological tricks to make the person doubt their own sanity. By
so this,
examples are
this
like
one's also sometimes called psychological abuse,
open,
right?
Saying, oh, you forgot this, you didn't do this, making them question their own judgment. And when someone is questioning if their mind is together, then they're going to isolate others, the people who could actually be helping them, which is what their abuser wants. Their abuser wants them to be able to cling to them, to only depend on them, because that's how they can influence their power and control over that person. So this.
And so what she's talking about there with the moving keys around and stuff, she's kind of glossing over a lot of it, but the term that she's talking about is called gaslighting, right? Probably everyone's familiar with this term. It's all over pop psychology right now. And so gaslighting, a form of emotional abuse that involves manipulating someone into questioning their own reality, perceptions, or memories. So it's a coercive control tactic that can happen in many types of relationships, including romantic, familial, and professional. So types of it would be like denying facts, downplaying someone's concerns, flipping stories. Maybe one day, when I'm feeling brave, we'll have a conversation on narcissism, or we'll have a stream on narcissism, and a very typical tactic that reverse who the victim and offender are in a situation, right? That's a common tactic in abuse. Fortunately, abusive people, ironically, quite often see themselves as the victim in a situation, despite perpetrating harm on other people. So, and then blaming others, that sort of thing. So this is blaming others. I'd call this more blame shifting than gaslighting, but there's some bleed over on these definitions. So
this is also another one, just as verbal and emotional, where it's really hard to pinpoint because you're doubting yourself. You're doubting your sanity. You're not feeling as though you're at 100%. So you don't want to tell someone that, hey, I think I'm losing my keys, or I think I'm losing my mind. That's not something, because of the stigma with mental illness. So
I lose my keys really all the time. It's nothing to do with abuse.
That's unfortunately something that abusers take advantage of. Number 5 is financial and economic abuse. I think this is one that I feel like more people are starting to get to know, that money or withholding money can definitely be a means of asserting power and control. This is what the abuser uses, and money is no different. So with money, it's about you not letting the person budget, not letting the person work, so that they can have a sense of independence. Because when you do have your own cash flow and you understand what's going on with the money, you feel a type of just independence. You just feel like, okay, I feel like I can stand on my own 2 feet. So when
and I would say financial abuse in particular, we tend to see this most common in 2 situations. And I've worked in case management before, so unfortunately I've worked with people who have been the victims of all of these different types of abuse. financial abuse in particular, we tend to see with either perpetrated by an adult who's taking care of someone elderly, and so a lot of times the elderly person will be financially taken advantage of, or an instance where you've got a couple and one spouse is financially dependent on the other one. That tends to be most often where we see financial abuse.
That's taken away from you, then it could really leave you feeling like depending on this person, which is what the abuser wants. And this is often one of the number one reasons why so many people in abusive situations don't leave, because of the financial means, because they don't know how they will survive, how they're going to get away, how are they going to pay gas money, where are they going to go, clothing, shelter. Those are real things that you need to think about when you're leaving an abusive situation. And so that's why financial can be a big way for people to stay in abusive relationships, and as for the abuser to implicate power and control over that person.
And I would say, so I've personally known people that have been in that situation where they're like, oh God, I'm like financially dependent on this person. I don't know, if I can leave them. And I think this is a toxic relationship or an abusive relationship, whether it's mutually or a single perpetrator or otherwise. I will say there's a lot of resources out there for people that are trying to escape toxic, dysfunctional, and or abusive relationships. So, like often if you are in that situation and you reach out to, say, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, they will hook you up with resources and steer you in the right direction to getting help with that stuff if you think that the finances might be a barrier to leaving a toxic relationship.
6, I didn't know about this, that this was actually a type of abuse that people are recognizing, but I was happy when I did. And that's cultural identity. When someone is not speaking the dominant language and keeping them isolated from others by giving them only what information you want to give as a means of power and control, that can be characterized as abuse. Also for the LGBTQ, I hope I got that politically correct. But threatening to out somebody can also be a form of abuse, of you making them fall in line or behave in a particular way because you are threatening them. So that's another way of power and control.
That's actually a really good point. Yeah, so cultural abuse, I would say, is more of a more recently recognized one. But yeah, I love the examples that she brings up. I think that's super relevant. If someone's, gender identity or sexual identity is something that they're not exposing publicly, and you threaten or blackmail them with exposing that, I could totally see how that's a type of abuse. So that's actually a really great one.
Racial slurs are also a way of abusing someone culturally based on their identity. So for an abusive relationship, it can include any or all of these all at the same time can characterize that you're in an abusive situation. So don't think that you have to meet all 6 of them. You just have to be one, and you're in an abusive situation, and there are ways to get out. As I said before, and
that's a good point that she brings up, that it's quite possible for your to be in a situation where there's just one type of abuse present in any kind of relationship that you're in, again, romantic or otherwise. It's also completely common for there to be more than one type present. So don't feel like, oh, well, it's only just this. Oh, it's only just verbal abuse, so it's not real abuse because they're not hitting me. Still an abusive relationship, right? So psychological, same thing. Emotional, financial as well. So just keep that in mind.
the video, I will leave